Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. This is our US Open recap episode. Obviously, we do this after each of the slams. As always, I have with me my co-host and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. He was on site every day of the tournament. Before we dive into some specifics, I won't stand up, but I will clap. I mean, a very, very, very good tournament for the Americans, both on the men and women's side. We had two semis on the women's side. We had two semis on the men's side. We still didn't get that title on the men's side, but we're getting closer, Steve.
Yeah, look, it was terrific to see Pegula, who had the quarterfinal syndrome, 6-7 quarterfinals in her career, couldn't break that pattern, and she goes all the way to the final and acquitted herself so well against Sabalenka in two tight sets. And then we had Taylor Fritz, and as you know, I don't need to remind you, we've kind of, you and I have sort of gone through the trials and tribulations with him. There are times we've been more optimistic than other times, but that was great to see for him too, because he'd been in the quarters a year ago losing to Djokovic, quarters of Australia losing to Djokovic, quarters of Wimbledon where he lost to Musetti a bit disappointingly, and here he is. And the best part of it was what he said afterwards, that he didn't feel like he played extraordinarily well at any time in the tournament. So that encourages him to think that he was playing well enough, but not great. And so in his mind, he feels he can surpass that. So anyway, tremendous showings from both Pegula and Fritz to be
And,
the runners up.
and prior to yesterday, we're recording this Monday night. Prior to yesterday, the last U.S. man played in a slam final was Andy Roddick in 2009. Lost that great final to Roger Federer. The last American to play in the U.S. Open final was also Roddick in 2006. Lost to Federer again. And of course, Andy was the last American who won it. And there's nothing back in 2003. And to Andy, I mean, Andy's humble about it. There's nothing more than Andy would want than his name to get rid
Oh,
of all
yeah.
those stats that I just read.
Oh, you couldn't be more right. And he's said that many times, and it's obviously genuine. And look, we're closer now. We're a lot closer. And let's not forget that, we have young players like Ben Shelton emerging. There's a bunch of Americans. It's not just Taylor that we hold out hopes for. So it is encouraging. It is encouraging. And I think, again, in Pegula's case, now for her, but she won it a year ago, and we haven't seen her win her last major. That she will reemerge too. So there's a lot to be encouraged about in American tennis.
The I do want to talk about let's go to the round of 16 with Tommy Paul because I know we talked about it last episode. We didn't think he played very well against Diallo in the previous round, but he got through it and he was really looking forward to playing that match with Sinner, which was on Monday night um a week ago from today. And Tommy, he raced out to a 4-1 first set double break lead, but like he loses 7-6, 7-6, 6-1. But to me, I never felt Tommy could keep pace with Sinner during that match. I could not get over, Steve, the extraordinary power. You were there on site. I was watching it on TV. The sound of the ball coming off of Sinner's racket was like a pop, a thwack, and the court coverage, especially from the corners from Sinner. If you can just describe the type of power and how it sounds when you're there in person.
Yeah, very difficult to describe. It does remind me a bit, though, of how you could be in the old days with the center court, or you would do it outside Ash. Now you hear applause, a certain type of applause, and you know who it's for. You knew when Federer had just won a big point, for instance, by the nature, the sound, the depth of the applause. Here, yeah, it's a very thunderous, clean sound coming off his racket, and the point is, if you close your eyes didn't watch the point, you'd know which shots were Sinner's and which shots were Tommy Paul's. That's the best way I can describe it, because you know pace, how much pace he's getting, how cleanly he's hitting it. There are occasional mishits, but not that many. And yes, it was apparent that night. It was apparent again in the final when I felt like he hit his stride. We can get to that later. I just felt like in the final, the real Sinner emerged. He was getting there, all the way through the tournament. But I thought we saw by far the best Sinner in the final round.
All tennis players know this, but when you play certain opponents, sometimes you like the type of ball that comes off your opponent's racket. Sometimes you don't like it. In this case, when I was watching Sinner play Tommy Paul, I felt like Sinner was seeing Tommy's ball like a beach ball, and he was just, I mean, he was seeing the ball so cleanly, and just again, the power was amazing, and you did a really good job describing that.
But David, just a brief interjection. I agree with you. I agree with most of that. I felt like he got himself in a bind there to go 2 breaks down, but it tells you something about his temperament, his disposition, his determination. That rather than say I'm 2 breaks down, I'm going to start thinking I want to start playing a little better, but I'll turn things around in the second set. That he didn't give up on that set, and it also told us that Tommy's a bit vulnerable. I think you really have to be able to protect a 2 break lead, especially in an opening set against an opponent who's the number one player in the world. You got so it told us things about both players. Tommy continued to play beautifully through the second set, so he didn't collapse, but he had to have that set, and I think both players knew it. He had to win that opening set. It was critical to him. For Jannik, not as much. So I just thought that was a revealing set from both sides of the net. The greatness of Sinner and the fact that Tommy Paul is terrific, but those are leads. I'm sure he talked about it with his coach, Brad Stein, afterwards about what might have gone wrong. But he's a good enough server that I think I felt he should have probably been able to close out the set. Don't think he would have won the match anyway, but that would have really put him in the right frame of mind to try to build on something. Very interesting set all around. Now, he did do a great job at the end of the set. It was completely getting away from him. It was 4-1 Tommy, and then next thing you know, it's 4-5, and he's set point down. He serves an ace out wide in the ad court. So he did do well to bring it back into a tiebreak, but I'm sure that was very disappointing for him. He kept competing well, but he needed that first set.
He did. I mean, again, he played well through that second set too. I'm just thinking to myself, like, can Tommy keep this in crazy good level from Jannik? And
the other thing,
it fell off in the third, but
yeah, the other thing that happened was that in that second set tiebreak, Tommy got up 5-4. It was Sinner serving at 4-5, so Tommy was close and had second serves, couple of second serves. He tried to be very from Sinner. He tried to be very aggressive on the returns, but those second serves were hit with real. They had a lot of heavy kick on them in depth, and he was not able to get a hold of them. He missed the returns, and that's because Sinner really didn't back off on his second serve. I think Tommy was hoping he'd get a clean hit and be able to attack those, and then Sinner was able to finish that off. So Tommy was close to making it 1-set all as well. Great first 2 sets. Inevitably in the third, Sinner pulled away.
Let's go to the All-American men's semi with Taylor and Francis Tiafoe. Heading into that match, Fritz led head-to-head, 6-1, but I think everybody who was looking at match didn't take much stock into that. They hadn't played on Ash before. Francis loves this environment. I think it was everyone that 6-1. I don't think people put a lot of weight to that. It was a good match. Francis was up 2-1. A lot of things happened in that fourth set that we'll talk about, including that 31 ball rally in the middle of that set. That seemed to really take its toll on Francis, as we then saw in the fifth. But that rally, it was crazy. That really, you could look back now and say that point decided the match. And I think it was 3-3 in the fourth at that time.
Yeah.
Then we all know the terrible game that Francis would love to have back at 4-5 in the fourth.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think you can make a case that it decided it, but I really feel like what decided it was obviously Francis at 4-5, 40-15, that, serves 2 doubles. And that lets him back in, then a forehand mishit, and then a forehand drop shot in the net. And those 4 points to me are what did it, because I still think he had enough in him. But I think when that game got away and he was starting to feel it there was no chance in the fifth, because he got blitzed those first 4 games of the fifth set. He didn't win very many points. I think he might have won 6 points in those 4 games. And Then he did break Taylor, but lost the last two games quickly. No, I don't think he won
When
a
he
point in the
broke
last two
Taylor, I
games.
thought
So
like because he was completely gassed, but I'm like, okay, maybe he'll get a second win there in this fifth. And he broke it, and then he broke Taylor, he got broken right back. Did you think there was any hope that Francis was about to get that second win back when he broke Taylor, or not really?
no, I didn't. I didn't have a lot of because I still felt okay, even if he holds, Taylor's going to bear down hard, serve his way to 5-2. He had the cushion of it had two breaks. It was
Two
down to
breaks.
one. So no, I didn't have a lot of hope. And then when I saw Francis make a couple of errors at the start of the 1-4 game, then I thought, no, he's not. And he had nothing left again. I mean, that was kind of a little freakish that he got the break. I think Taylor, you know what was happening, David? People were actually starting to file out of Ash Stadium at 4-love, believe it or not. A lot of the crowd, they have those different rules with crowds, but a lot of them just got up and left and they thought it was over, I think. And I honestly think that distracted Taylor, to tell you the truth. Might have been part of the reason why he played the loose game. But no, I didn't have a lot of hope because I just felt like Francis didn't do that much to get the break, and Taylor double folded it away. So I still thought it was in Taylor's hands.
So Francis has now made two U.S. Open semis in the last 3 years. That's nothing
Yeah.
to scoff about. I mean, especially with the year he had this year, it was not a good year up until Wimbledon, Steve. So at least he'll have some good positive feelings heading into the fall and then next year. The
Yeah, he
final.
said some interesting things, though. He did. You're right about that, and it's encouraging in one way. He admitted how much it hurt, though. This one, he sounded more devastated than by the Alcaraz loss 2 years ago, and he sounded like he was trying to commit himself to finishing the year strong. I like that. I like the fact that he knows that everybody feels like he can turn it on at the Open, but he wants to do more than that. We'll see where it leads, because he thought he would. He claimed that he thought he was the better player for most of the night, and that's why it hurt to lose. But let's see where this leads. He's gonna. I think he would be all the more dangerous if we saw sustained high quality play from him instead of sporadic. And
And so far, the coaching
yeah,
relationship with David Witt has been a good influence on him. So if they stay together, we'll see how that works out as well. All right, the
yeah.
final. The final, Jannik Sinner and Taylor Fritz. First two sets were pretty routine in Jannik's favor. I felt the third set, the crowd, Taylor had put up a heck of a fight the third set, and the New York crowd really came alive. They were really pulling for Taylor, and he was up a break there, Steve.
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, just quickly to go back to the first two, you're right. They were pretty clear cut, although the beginning, Sinner had the immediate break for 2-love, and Taylor managed to win 3 games in a row. He's on serve, up 3-2 on serve. Then he didn't win another game. Then in the second set, and he lost his serve 3 times, Fritz, in the first set. Then in the second set, David, he did serve really well, Fritz. They both did, but really Fritz had with a higher percentage and easy holds up until 4-5. Then it was scoreboard pressure, and he cracked a bit to lose that set. So he didn't play that badly in the second. And maybe that's part of the reason why he did so well in the third. But he fended off a couple of break points, helped a bit by some forehand cross-court errors from Sinner, one on a return, one during the rally, when Sinner had 2 break points there to go up 4-2. And when Taylor got out of that game, that's when we started seeing him fist pumping, which was, by the way, I think one of the reasons why the crowd did get so excited. They saw him become so exhilarated that they responded beautifully to that. And then he got the break in the next game, went up 5-3, but at 5-4, he just couldn't serve it out. It was a really well-played game by Sinner to keep himself in the set, and then he ran it out from there. So
the point that he got broken on the game point, it was kind of a weird point, and he kind of missed a forehand volley into the net. It was
yeah.
kind of a wacky point.
Yeah, well, he got drop shotted. Of course, he was brought in by the drop. He was a little off balance getting the drop shot back. And then Sinner's pass was not that great. You're right. But he had him just a little bit off balance on the volley. And you thought that Fritz could have made it, and he hit it in the net. That was a bit unfortunate because that was a makeable volley. But he was a little bit discombobulated from the time that he ran up to cover the drop shot.
Yes. So, hey, Taylor was up 5-3. Sinner comes back, wins the last 4 games of the match, just like the women's champ did, Aryna Sabalenka against Jessie Pegula. Pegula was up 5-3 in the second. We're going to get to that in a second. let's go to the women's side of things, if you don't mind, Steve, and we can
Sure.
talk about the quarterfinal between Jessie Pegula and Iga Swiatek. Jessie wins 6-2, 6-4. She breaks the what you said earlier, the 6-7 strings of losses in a quarterfinal. During our previous show, we talked about a potential match with Pegula and Iga, and maybe to break this string, you have to go through the number one player in the world, which
Yeah.
is exactly what happened. Steve, I will say this, not to take anything away from Pegula, and I'm sure she had something to do with this, but Iga never got on track. 41 unforced errors, Steve, in two sets. In two sets, 6-2, 6-4. This was not Iga's best performance. Again, I don't want to take away credit from Jess because she had a great tournament. We're going to talk more about her in a minute, but this was not an A grade performance from Iga.
No, I couldn't. I totally agree with that. I think Jess played very well, kept to a high level, served well the whole match. I think was only broken once, and yeah, Iga was uneasy. She was irritable. She was trying to converse with her coach, and I think she felt maybe the scouting report wasn't right. Whatever it was, she was in that tense state, and you felt like she couldn't come out of it. Tried to at the end of the match, managed to hang on at 3-5, but Pegula closed it out after reaching 40-11 in the last game. 2 match points got away. She did it on the third. So I just feel like, yeah, a lot of it had to do with a definitely an apprehensive Swiatek and whatever was going on in her mind. She was not comfortable out there, and Pegula exploited it to the hilt. So it was a combination. It was an American crowd that didn't help Iga that she's playing an American. A lot of times she might pull that match out against another foreign player, but this is Pegula, who's so popular, who's having a great night herself. So, but it's more evidence of she has won this tournament. She did it a couple of years ago. That's the only other major she's won outside of Roland Garros, where she's got 4 triumphs. So it's more evidence that she really wants to improve upon. It's not that she can't win on hard court. She's won plenty of hard court tournaments. She's won here once, but also suffered a lot of difficult losses, and losses like this where she didn't play that well. That can't be pleasing to her. So it'll be interesting to see what she can do. Maybe she shouldn't. She's got, I think, a pretty comfortable lead for number one, despite Sabalenka winning here. So maybe it would help her to play a slightly reduced autumn schedule, because it seems to me she needs to clear her head. She also took a real pounding from Sabalenka on a fast court in Cincinnati. Maybe that didn't help coming in either. But this has been a difficult phase for her, post French Open.
Um, Pegula in the semis then played Muchova, and I don't know if it was like a hangover from her win over Iga. Pegula got off to a terrible start, down 1-6, 0-2. She was 1 point away from being down 0-3, Steve. Were you concerned that, I mean, did you ever feel that Jess was going to lose that match even after that horrible start, or did you think at some point she was going to turn this match
Oh, I
around?
didn't know if she would, and I had my doubts, and she had her doubts. She talked about how she felt she was being given a lesson, and she was really quite candid about how badly she was being beaten, and also talking about how funny tennis is, where 1 point can turn it around. And the point you're talking about, she hit a forehand pass pretty well, just low enough, and I had the perfect view of it from our Muchova making the forehand volley. And you knew if it landed anywhere in the court going down the line, she had the winner, but she couldn't control it. It went long. It was such an important point. And then Pegula really turned it on from there. She took the lead 4-2. It did go to 4-all, but she closed out that set. And then the third set was terrific because the scoreline was a little misleading. There were 2 games on Pegula's serve, one at 3-1 and one at 4-2, where she was 40 love up and then went break point down
Yeah.
and still held on both times. The tennis was spectacular, David, through that period. And Muchova is just so much fun to watch. She's such a great shot maker. There were times Pegula just looked at her and smiled across the net, like, how in the world did you pull off that shot? So I think the third set of that match, especially, was some of the most entertaining tennis in the tournament, although the final came very close to matching it in terms of crowd appreciation and level of play from both participants.
Yeah, let's go. Oh, and credit. I do want to give. We both want to give credit to Muchova because she had an injury not too long ago, and for her to be playing this type of tennis and making semis of a slam, kudos to her and her team for getting her
Yeah.
healthy. We do want to talk about the. I mean, there's multiple storylines here, right? Emma Navarro in the other semi. Unbelievable tournament for her. Sabalenka knew going in, well, she didn't know who'd she play in the final, but she knew there was a possibility that she would have to beat an American in the semi and an American in the final. And we remember last year she had that experience in the final against Coco. And after winning the first set, she wound up losing the second and third against obviously a very pro Coco type crowd being in New York. Against Navarro, it got dicey there at the end. Sabalenka wins 6-3, 7-6. Navarro was down 3-5 in the second. This was close to a 6-3, 6-3 win for Sabalenka. Comes back and takes the lead at 6-5, Steve. Then Sabalenka gets it together. The power, especially in the tiebreaker, was just incredible.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right about that whole sequence. But prior to that, Sabalenka also had 15-40 with Navarro serving a 2-4 to get the second break that would have relaxed her. She tightened up a little, and Emma really picked up her game after pulling that one out. And yeah, it was a great surge from Navarro to take the 6-5 lead and got to deuce on Sabalenka's serve, and Sabalenka aced her out wide. That was a very big point. Then they go to the breaker, and Navarro's up two zip in the tiebreak, and Sabalenka ran off 7 straight points. That was some of the most impressive tennis of the tournament.
I agree.
From her, the way she finished off that breaker. And frankly, I think the way she fended off Navarro put her in good stead for the final, because she had to do some of that in the final as well with Jess. The fact that she got pushed that hard, went through the late second set tension, was just what she needed. And in a sense, visited those same types of moments in the final.
That's such a good point, because she had it against Coco last year. It didn't go her way. Let's say she didn't have this, we'll quote unquote call it dress rehearsal. Maybe the first time she does this is against Pegula in the final again, and who knows how she reacts in the final versus semi. But having that similar experience in the semi, getting over the hump, had to feel good for her going into the final versus Jess.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it was just, I'm sure you share my view. It was such an entertaining final. And you had Pegula go up the early break in the first set at 2-1. The next thing you know, Sabalenka's run off 4 games in a row. She's 5-2. Next thing you know, Jess has leveled at 5-all. Then they had 2 4-deuce games in a row to close the set. Really long games. And Jess had a chance to get into a tiebreak, couldn't manage it. So it was 7-5 Sabalenka, who then runs out to a 3-love second set lead, David. So she's now won 5 more games in a row, another sequence of 5 games.
Point away from being 4-0 in the
second. Yeah, break point for 4-love, but well played by Pegula. A couple of great forehand down the lines and she forced the error. It wasn't, Sabalenka didn't give that one away. It was earned by Jess. And now Jess is on a 5-game tear. Pegula played her best tennis of the match to go from love 3 break point down all the way to 5-3. And then Sabalenka again turns it with 4 straight games. And that again was similar to the way she turned it at the end of the second set with Navarro, to hold serve at 5-6 and win the breaker, to turn up the volume of her intensity and produce her best tennis when it mattered the most. And I think Pegula realized that. She did everything in her power to win that second set, especially. And first set was very close, but second set to be up 5-3. It's not that she played badly. She didn't really make that many mistakes from 5-3, but Sabalenka was just first rate.
I'm looking at the draw now, and I'm trying to think. We've seen a lot of tennis. Sabalenka, did she lose a set in these 2 weeks? I don't know if she did.
I think maybe once I'll check that. I think maybe once in the early rounds, at the late match, she might have lost 1 set.
Oh, I think you're right on the very late match, maybe. But that being said, I mean, and we've been doing this through our preview, through our mid-US Open,
she did. She lost the first set to Alexandrova, the number 29 seed, 6-2, and came back 1-2.
That was the very late match, right?
Very late, but that was it. Otherwise,
she has played an amazing. I mean, she had an amazing fortnight. Her power is unbelievable. What she can do when she's on. I mean, you got to try to hope. And Emma tried it. Coco did it last year. Emma tried it. Jess also tried it. You have to kind of just try to get one more ball back, and Sabalenka could eventually miss. And then when she misses, at least in the past, it usually came in bunches, right? And you could take advantage. Those bad periods are becoming less and less for Sabalenka right now.
True. And yeah, she regains her composure more quickly because you can see it. I mean, you teach the game, you know what I'm talking about. When she goes off and starts missing shots, she can miss by 6 feet, and she's frantic, and you're worried that it's going to that it will last and cost her a match, and it did, frankly, against Coco last year, but not in the semis or finals here. She's getting better and better at reining it in when she needs to, and regaining her equilibrium is the way I would put it, emotionally, and that was very impressive. Because if Pegula had managed to push that match into a third set of the final, it was pretty noisy during the Navarro match. It would have been much more so in that final round. And who knows, it might have been enough for Pegula to win the match. But I thought, yeah, Sabalenka as a competitor in tight corners of matches is getting better. And it makes me encouraged that we're going to see her challenge Iga in terms of collecting major titles. Down the road, I think she's going to be able to pick up for quite a while now, I would think, a couple a year. I wouldn't be shocked if she had a 3-slam year, but certainly two in a year like we saw this year is not going to be beyond her for a while. It can happen.
I don't doubt it because, again, just the power alone, there are very few players that can match that power, and it's becoming more sustained over the course of a match and over the course of a tournament. All right, so both Sabalenka and Sinner won Australia and the U.S. Open. The last time that happened, the same players won Aussie and U.S. was in 1988, Steffi Graf and Mats Wielander, so that was an interesting stat. In 2024, Sinner and Carlos split the slam, Steve. That could happen in 2025 and 2026 and 2027 and beyond. Let's see who else. There's some players here who have been very close to getting a slam. One being Sasha Zverev. I would not be surprised, and he's played well in Australia. I would not be surprised to see him at the very, very late rounds of Australia. But in
Well,
2024, it was Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner.
Yeah, David, but that's the problem. We're not surprised to see him in the latter stages, but this was yet another disappointment. Listen, Fritz played a terrific match against Zverev to beat him in the quarters here, and he opened and closed. He won the first and 4 sets in breakers, and all credit to Taylor to repeat his win over Sasha at Wimbledon. But he's taking a lot of hard losses. I worry about Sasha. I worry about Medvedev, who lost to Sinner in the quarters. And I say to myself, okay, so I just feel like Carlos and Sinner are going to continue that dominance. The guy that I think is going to get in their way at least one time, I remain convinced, number 25 is going to come Novak Djokovic's way. He didn't have it here. He was too soon after the Olympics. He could not find that extra drive to carry him through. But I'm convinced he's going to get number 25 next year. But these guys most likely grab the other 3, and that could continue for 3-4 years. What I like is I wanted to see Sinner come back to his best form. He was so great at the end of last year, early this year, and then he had his issues, and obviously we know he was carrying around the knowledge of the drug testing and all that was weighing on his mind. In the meantime, Carlos is winning the French and Wimbledon back-to-back. Now Carlos is going through a difficult phase, and Sinner is back on the beam again. But I think we're going to see some more epics between them. And I think those who were ready to sort of hand the mantle to Alcaraz and say he's just too good are underestimating Sinner. I think Sinner is going to be right in that rivalry with him. Carlos may have more natural, innate talent, dazzling shot-making abilities, but Sinner, as you pointed out earlier, the potency of his ground game, his serve is also greatly improved. His movement,
court coverage too is very.
Court coverage, I think, is more efficient sometimes than Carlos's. Even though Carlos has, he has the likes of Novak shaking their head sometimes at balls that he can reach. I still feel Sinner more consistently out of the corners can do it than Carlos. So I'm encouraged that rivalry will endure and that Sinner will hold his own, which would be the best thing for the game if these two guys went back and forth a bit, beating each other, claiming majors, and developing a rivalry that will grip the public for years to come, just as the Djokovic, Federer, Nadal matchups did for so long, that these two could carry the game for a long time.
I also think some of the results that you saw in 2024 in the summers post Olympics were pretty goofy. And I think it's because the Olympics were thrown in. You know, you went from clay to grass, back to clay, then hard. I think when you look in 2025 after Wimbledon, you're not going to see as many surprising results
Yeah,
in
I
the hard
agree with
court
that.
season. The Olympics kind of threw a hiccup in there for a lot of people, a lot of players' preparation going into New York. I think we won't see as much of that in 2025.
No, I totally agree. And obviously it had a particularly profound effect on both Djokovic and Alcaraz for the different reasons. Novak, the letdown of a euphoric triumph and finally realizing his goal of getting the gold medal, and Carlos, the deep disappointment of coming close in the final, losing in two tiebreaks and not getting the gold. And that to him was a bit depressing. So neither one had enough time to recover emotionally from what happened in Paris.
I agree with that. It's amazing to me once the U.S. Open ends, Steve. You know, you start the year with Australia, and then to me, it takes forever to get to the French Open. Then once you get to
Yeah.
the French Open, you got French Open, Wimbledon, and then obviously we had the Olympics this year, but then the U.S. Open, and it's like boom, 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 three pretty quick, and then it's done. Um, it was an interesting year. Obviously, we just talked with the Olympics. We'll see how Novak does in 2025. Wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't put much doubt. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he does get number 25. We'll see what type of shape and
Now,
motivation comes in.
if he does that, David, sorry to jump in. If he does that, then I have to wonder. Let's just say that he did it in Australia. At that point, he might say to himself, there really is nothing left. Do I
You don't
really want
think he'd retire at the end of a year?
end of the year? Maybe before the end of the year. It's hard to say. I know that would be a
No, I'm not saying retire this year. I'm saying whatever year he decides to retire, do you think he would do it at the end of that year? Not
well,
like in the
saying not necessarily end of that year. I'm saying, for instance, if he won in Australia, he might go home and reevaluate and say, you know what, I've been killing myself for a long time. I put myself through so much tension. I make it so hard on the people around me and my family. He knows he's difficult that way. He'd be the first to admit it because that's what it takes for him to win these majors. And at that point, he might say, this is just no point. I passed Margaret Court. I had 8 at year-end number ones. I've got 25 majors. By then, if he once he wins that next title, he's got 100 titles at least. So it's just enough. Now, it could be that you're right. It could be that he says, no, I'm just going to give myself, I can't ruin my year. If he won Australia, he knows he can't ruin it. So maybe he does want to give all the remaining 3 majors one more shot. But I think somewhere during that year, if he does win a major next year, yeah, by the end of the year, I would expect him to say that's it for me.
Well, there is still some tennis left to be played this year. We'll do something with Laver Cup. We probably won't do episodes every week, but for the viewers and listeners out there, we're not done yet. Don't worry. We'll still do something for Laver Cup, and there are the events in the autumn as well. But Steve, this was a good year, interesting year. We're always going to do our year end recap where we'll tie everything together. But all in all, I'll let you
And we're
leave
going to
with
bring in the other David, who, as we discussed in the last episode, I had the pleasure of finally meeting in person. But I love the way he approached it. He's such a cerebral observer of the game. He's got this quiet personality, but he says things that really have impact with me. So looking forward to him joining us.
He's a very smart kid, and well, you described him very well. I'll leave it to you with the last word before we sign off at the end of these 4 slams.
No, I think, David, obviously there was a sense of real possibility in the air in New York as the Americans made their way through the draw. And then when both Pegula and Fritz got to the final, there were more hopes. Okay, reality set in. They each lost to great players in the finals, but at least was a big shot in the arm for American tennis. And it was nice to see both Sinner and Sabalenka, who'd won in Australia, and then to come back and win a second major, prove their hard court supremacy. And particularly for Sinner on the heels of this episode, testing positive and being exonerated and yet having a certain cloud over him that I thought was in some ways unfair, that he was able to bring the subject back to his tennis and have people, that was the narrative again, how great Sinner is as a player, how well he carries himself. And he put the other subject into the background, I think. And I was happy for that because those were very difficult circumstances to have that suddenly become public news 6 or 7 days before the US Open. That was not easy on him. And it says a lot about his character that he overcame it and won his second major. So I thought that was a really impressive effort.
And if you don't mind, I meant to say this earlier, and I know you'll agree with this. You know, you come across a lot of people in the tennis industry, some good, some not so good. I just want to give a shout out to Taylor's coach, Michael Russell. We both know him. I've gotten to become, a little bit friendly with him, and he's one of the nicest guys out there. Not just in the tennis industry, just as a person as a whole. And happy for Michael and his wife and the team around Taylor. It's just nice to see good things happen to good people, Steve.
Yes, and it just a quick tack onto that. He took a more assertive role in this tournament. Fritz was leaning on him a bit more. I like that because a lot of times I know he's giving him a ton of information pre-match, but during these matches, during the Tiafoe match, I mean, Fritz was very complimentary to the fact that Russell, encouraged him to stick with it and not get discouraged. And I was glad to see him get that kind of credit and play that kind of significant role during the matches.
Yeah, it was great to see. And again, we loved seeing good things happen to good people. And that with that, Steve, I want to thank you as always for your time. This was fun as always, and we'll do another one of these episodes soon. We're not going anywhere.
No, definitely not, David. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it immensely.